Big Beard RC. In this video, I'm going to show you how to shorten your shocks. I've been asked by one of my subscribers to make a video to show how we reduce the overall size of the shock. It's quite simple, really. You need some tubing. This is the same tubing that's used on washer jets in cars and on fuel tanks for lawnmowers and so forth. It's only cheap. I think I paid £1.50 for 2 meters, which is really reasonable. Now, what we need to do is we first need to measure the size of the shock first, which is 80 millimeters. So we've got 80 millimeters there. So we want to reduce this by 5 millimeters. So we dismantle the shock, random screw. So we take off the cap, pull the spring off. We then grip the bottom. I really need to invest in some shock spanners and pliers. We remove the bottom, place that there. We then remove the top. Now you will have to get rid of the oil that's in there. I'm just doing as a over there because I've got a tub out of view. So we remove the shock oil and then carefully push the piston up. Place that there for a moment. Now this is where the tubing comes into play. We want to reduce this by 5 millimeters, so we cut 5 millimeters of the tubing, which I've already done 4 times for 4 shocks. I'm not going to show you 4, I'm going to show you 2. So you slide the tubing onto the shaft. You then replace the shaft and piston in. We would fill with oil. No, I'm not going to do this because these are an old set that I have lying around and they won't be used. So this can be quite helpful for cars that don't have links, suspension links with the droop screw in, and no facility to put a screw in to touch the chassis to raise the leg up. So like the Wltoys A959 and I think the 979, they're set as they are. So your dog bones are sat like that, where you want them raised up more so it's a smoother experience and you don't lose any speed. It's easier on the motor, it's easier on the dog bones, easier on your diff cups, drive shafts, everything. So what you can do with this is you can actually lower the ride height of the vehicle without having the droop screws. So this can become quite a handy tip. So we then reassemble as we've disassembled. So we put the cap on first, not the spring, as you've probably just seen. We put the cap on. You don't need to over tighten them, just in case you need to remove them at some point. Pop the cap back on, and there we have it. So as you can see, it's shorter. So let's measure it. And that is bang on 75 millimeters. So by inserting a 5 millimeter piece of tubing on the inside of the shaft, it then stops it being allowed to retract. So as you can see in the difference in the height, it's 5mm difference. If you want a 10mm drop, you put 10mm of tubing in. If you want a 15mm, 15mm tubing. So I will run through one more with you, so you're all comfortable in how I do it. So remove the cap and the spring. We then remove the end cap. Somebody wants to tell me in the description what these are actually called, because I don't know. Don't just call them end caps. We then remove the top of the suspension. And there's no oil in this one because I removed it earlier on. So we pop the piston and shaft out again. Place the tubing on and reinsert. Make sure that the pin's in. Pull it down. We'd fill with oil, or if you want to run them dry, then that's entirely your choice. So we've got the end cap to put back on. They take a while, these. Right, so that's on. Spring back on. End cap back on. Same ride height. So if that was the rear of your vehicle, you'd have two exactly the same. And your ride height will be 5mm lower, which would be bringing your drive shafts more centre. So that's exactly the same size. So 5mm tubing like that reduces the overall size by 5mm. What we can also do with this tubing is, I will show you now. This is another little tip and trick I've learned. When you lower the suspension of your vehicle, or you have vehicles that do lots of jumps, your suspension takes a pounding. So like this one, if you can hear that, that's actually the sound of the suspension bottoming out. So what we can actually do is, you don't have to have the tube inside to do this, you can just do it without. If you remove the cap, and you put the rubber piping on there, then reattach the cap, it creates a bump stop, which the majority of modern cars, trucks, vans, motorbikes all have some form of bump stop to stop the suspension bottoming out and hitting the shaft into the shock absorber. So you reassemble what you need. I mean, you don't need 5mm, you can have less. It just depends on how much travel you want before it hits the bump stop. So if you listen to this now, there's no clanging. If you listen to that one, you have the clanging. No clanging. Clanging. And that's a good way of stopping the suspension bottoming out, especially on speed cars, as you've lowered the suspension to bring the suspension arm up. These compress in, so you have less and less and less travel, and you don't want big travel on a speed car, because if it jumps up, it messes with the geometry of the car. So as it's coming down, it'll stop itself, but it won't be jerky. Whereas if you use this one, it's going to hit solid, so it has some resistance to this one. So that's how to lower your suspension without using droop screws in your suspension arms, and also how to fit a homemade bump stop to stop your suspension bottoming out on your RC car shocks. So thanks for watching my video. If you like what you see, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on another video.